today's presentation. CC has partnered with MindField Group to present this series to you in order to provide you with some retail HR best practices and benchmarking data. Today's session is going to provide a high-level overview of retail recruitment best practices and help you understand how your retail organization measures up by comparing your results to industry benchmarks. To tell you more about what you'll hear today, I'd like to introduce our speaker. Cameron Baker co-founded MindField Group in 2005 with the focus on helping hourly employers improve the quality of their workforce. Born in Vancouver, Cameron is a competitive golfer and avid cyclist in his spare time. Cameron helped to grow the organization to over 60 employees and focuses his time on vision, strategy, and client relations. His expertise lies in sales, marketing, competitive strategy, and technology. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Devin. I am really excited to be here today, and want a special thank you to our CC for working with us on this. And I'd also thank my marketing department for such a fantastic bio. So a little bit today, what we found over the past couple of years is we've really struggled to find great data. And we've focused on this over the past year to not only aggregate our data, but also industry data to provide some really good, solid understanding of what is best practice, what are the key numbers that are really defining success in the talent acquisition space, specifically, but also so that our customers and partners can really measure themselves against other retailers. So that being said, I want to just hop right into it. As I mentioned, this is a three-part series, so we're kind of laying the framework here with some big data to start. MindField Group. There we go. What we do is we help hourly employers hire the best people and help hourly workers land jobs they love, and that's a mission here internally. So we collect a lot of this data from both employers and also hourly job seekers. And we, from a Canadian perspective, the leading provider of talent acquisition solutions. We both provide a complete outsourced recruitment solution, but also a candidate sourcing solution. And all the data you're going to see here today is based on a lot of the content that we've been able to generate over the last 12 months, so it is fresh information. A lot of the talent attraction and sourcing strategies that I'll talk about are based on the fact that we've driven over 1.5 million visitors to the collection of career sites that we host and manage. Through that, we've processed about 327,000 applicants, helped hire over 10,000 Canadians, and seen about a 22% conversion rate in the last year. And I like to start these presentations with framing up just why we talk about this data. Our sample size is right across Canada, and we've got a great aggregation of data that I think can be very relevant for you here today. So enough about us, but really getting into the first piece is understanding the cost of turnover. He knows turnover costs you money, but there's been a real lack of clarity around how much does it cost. And some of you on the call may have turnover percent or turnover data that you've measured, but what I'm hoping to do here is equip you with a really good understanding of how much it costs and how it impacts your business. So first off, here this is a study from the Hay Group, and this has been, to date, the best information that we've been able to find on understanding turnover levels. So I know there's a lot of numbers on here, so I'm going to start right off the top. So this is specifically retailers, and this is taken from data from 2012 and 2011. And well, this is kind of the turnover level. So at a corporate level, I'm saying in 2012, about a 12% turnover on average in retail corporate positions. And then you can see executive 3%, merchandising 10%. You'll see it's slightly down from 2011. And some other points are up slightly, but fairly the same. As we get down to the next level and look at the store level positions, which is really what we're here to talk about today. Part-time in 2012 averaged 67% turnover. Full-time staff in retail environments averaged 24% turnover. Assistant store managers 17, store managers 14, and district managers 8. Now, a couple things. There is a big difference in the turnover in part-time from 2011 and 2012. This is partly to do with an improved economy and just more stable environments. But you can see that the turnover is fluctuating slightly in other ones, but really that big change in the part-time. And we're seeing this continue. If you have currently your workforce in Alberta, my guess is you're going to be well north of that average. And finally, distribution center positions, hourly workers, shipper receivers and so forth at about a 22%, and then management within those distribution centers at about 10%. Now, a couple things. There's a lot of information on this slide, so you don't have to think you have to write this down frantically. The presentation will be available. But we've used this for the basis for a lot of benchmarking regarding just this turnover looking like in the retail sector from these different categories. We've done this data quite a bit, and always get customers. Some are shocked by it. Some of them are saying, "Well, I'm much better than that." Some are much worse. But the goal here was to give you a bit of an understanding of what that average is, so you can benchmark yourself from a turnover perspective. The cost of turnover, and this is specifically due with the grocery sector, and this is the best data we've been able to find and aggregate on all costs. And so we think we know it's very relevant to retail in general. Now, we don't have a sales associate on here, but there's a tremendous amount of it's very applicable. A cashier and a sales associate have some similarities as far as costs go. So with a union and a non-union environment, and for those on the call that work in a union environment, if you go look at this, there's no data on the union management, but the non-union looking at a $34,000 cost of turnover. So what we mean by this is when you use an employee, just how much does it cost? And what goes into this is the direct cost of feeding them, onboarding them, training them, the time and effort that goes into getting them onboarded, and then the opportunity cost, which is really much more the soft cost and a little bit of the things that are a little bit more difficult to measure on a P&L, but are very real, such as lost sales, lost customers, impact on employee morale and engagement, which is going to impact turnover in general. Down the line here, obviously, the costs get lower and lower from department manager. Other hourly personnel are things like perimeter employees, back of the house employees, shipper receivers in this type of a scenario. And then finally, cashiers, whereas in a non-union environment, looking at about $2,200 in an environment, and in a union environment, $43. So as you're seeing here, a union environment is a little bit more expensive, which is probably not a surprise given some of the requirements that some unions have. So information for us combined with the average turnover data really starts to provide a framework for you as a retailer to start to understand how much is higher turnover costing me. So I believe that everyone on the call is fairly aware that there's this direct and indirect cost, and this cost of turnover was really driving sometimes some very, very large numbers in your business. When we look at turnover, we think about it from a business impact perspective, and certainly, sales and profits. When you look at the key impacts around, the retail sector, we're in a spot where it's typically low wages. The jobs aren't terribly unattractive for the most part. Now, that's not to say some aren't, but many of them aren't, long-term career type roles when you're thinking about a prime role in a retail environment. Dissatisfied employees, it sometimes leads to, which ultimately leads to high turnover. Now, some of the things that go into this is you as a retailer really have a need for flexibility. You need people to be able to work on weekends and come in and out when you need them. But you also got roles that are fairly narrow in scope, fairly monotonous with the same type of role. And then you've got, on top of this, a limited selectivity in staffing. In particular markets in Canada, as many probably know, which I guess is why you're on the call here today, it can be very, very difficult to find good, solid, qualified staff, to get them for full-time roles, but even to get them into part-time roles, and those of which you can actually be flexible to meet your scheduling needs. Limited opportunities for advancement, what you start to see is some of the symptoms and some of the reasons why retailers see very, very high turnover rates. Our belief, cost perspective, is this impacts margins in a major, major way. And I'm going to give you some financial models here shortly to kind of use as a bit of a tool to benchmark yourself. Impact on your customers. So if you look at the customer's perspective, dissatisfied and disengaged employees in an environment you're typically going to have lower service quality. You're going to have typically employee continuity with customers, and everyone on the call here has got those great sales associates or those cashiers or those people that deal with your repeat customers, and a lot of the time they come back in just because of that relationship, and that is so critical. And the connection that your great people in your stores can make with those customers really ultimately help drive customer brand affinity. But it's also done incorrectly, and if you do have high turnover, it can really impact your customer. Which, if the customer's not coming back, and 3/4 of your staff is always new and untrained, or maybe you don't meet the requirements because you don't have a good system in place, can really impact your profits. So, at a really macro level, from how we view turnover on how it impacts margins and then a customer, to actually look at it from an improvement margin perspective, is how much better could your business be if you consistently, say you lowered your turnover by 10 to 20%, or you had a scenario where the customers consistently saw the same faces, same smiling faces in your stores. We believe that this turnover play is very, very critical to driving higher margins in your location. And that's going to drive, margins is going to provide a better environment with increased employee satisfaction, turnover, and ultimately low customer turnover. So why is important, and why tie this back, especially in the next couple of slides, is when you're thinking about how much does hiring cost me based on these averages and based on these average costs, what's its impact to the business, and what's that financial cost to you each year? A few different scenarios for different people on the call, and so we've got a few different company sizes that I'll walk you through this. So we'll look at the key roles that we've got measured here: part-time role, full-time role, ASMs, and store managers. And if we take a typical 100-person, it could be a location or even a company, if they're experiencing the average turnover levels in one of the roles from the research that we've got, we then drive a hiring demand. Combined with the average cost of turnover of that individual, starts to drive your total cost of turnover annually. So you can see here as an example of a 100-person location or a 100-person retailer, the cost based on the averages is just short of $200,000 a year for 53 hires. So these numbers start to grow substantially, and why it's important is we'll help equip you to make sure that you can go measure this yourself, so you can put this into a better perspective of your own business. You go to a company with 500 employees, again, same model, just increased volume of tens of employees, occurs to look at almost just short of $1 million per year in total turnover costs. 1,000 employees, the numbers start to grow again, obviously, to $1.7 million overall expected cost based on averages. And then finally, just went to 5,000 here, but a 5,000-person company with average turnover levels and moderate to low turnover costs, looking at just short of $9 million per year impacting your business. Now, sometimes when you think about hiring, a lot of the time the basic inputs are job posting and so forth. Everyone on the call knows that there's training and all this type of onboarding involved in indirect opportunity costs. But we believe this is a major component of how companies can go drive better margins through people practices. So from an average perspective, if you, again, this will be available to all of you, if you take your average turnover levels based on what's in here and then your average cost of turnover for these different buckets of roles, it'll start to give you a really good perspective on just, or some level of insight into how much turnover is actually costing you every single year. The turnover reasons, and this was key. This was a cross-section of about 100,000 different people from a Coca-Cola study based on the top reasons why people leave. And I think it's important, those of you on the call that do exit surveys or do have that subjective feedback, here's top 5 reasons. One is problem with work hours. And what we consistently see is that you'll hire someone into your store and you'll need them to work Thursday, Fridays, and Saturday nights, for example. They say, yeah, absolutely, my schedule works for this. And once they get in, you have a change in maybe your workforce, or 2 people over here, or a location has some issues, and then you're required to go change that person's schedule. That may not be what they initially said they could, or vice versa. They may have said, yeah, I can work Thursday nights, but what they really should have said was, I can work every second Thursday night because I got soccer practice every Thursday. These are very real micro problems that happen at the store level on an ongoing hiring basis. So disconnect with the work hours is the number one driver of turnover based on this study. The second biggest one is poor treatment by managers. I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. I don't have to get into that. Inadequate training. We're living in a world where Gen Y expects to be engaged and expects to be trained and expects to develop, and if they don't get that, that can really help drive turnover. Advanced possibilities, no advancement possibilities or perceived advancement possibilities. And finally, employees felt they're not integrated into the store team. Maybe quote unquote the old guard in that location. That operating in a certain way, and especially in a sales culture, people that are there that make their living necessarily want some new superstar coming in and taking away their sales. So this was a key component of this when it came to turnover, was really integrating. This is beyond onboarding, but really the culture of that store, culture in which it really embraces and makes new people feel welcome. So when we look at best practice recruitment process, there's things to think about. Now, I'm going to introduce what we believe is a best practice recruiting process, and many of you on the call have components and even all of this in place. Some of you may not, all of you have some parts of it because it's a basic recruitment process to a certain degree. When we think about the recruiting process, there's a series of steps that we believe really helps go and drive a consistent level of hire, but also can impact turnover, which ultimately impacts the bottom line from profits perspective. Number one being some kind of a simple way for jobs to get open. And this is pretty self-explanatory, whether it's an email or a fax or a web-based tool, but really making sure that the managers have an easy way to open a job. And many of you may have a system in place where they email head office and then the job gets opened from there. Some kind of position approval. If the stores and the network allowed to open jobs whenever they feel like it, making sure there's some kind of approval process in place for some of you. Broadcasting. So once that job does get approved and it gets posted to your, for example, career site, is where are you distributing that job, and are you distributing it to multiple different places? Easy apply. This is one of the biggest things that we're seeing right now, and we've got some really interesting stats. For those of you on the call that are familiar with some of the large aggregators such as Indeed and Simply Hired, a third of their traffic is coming from mobile phones now. So the need from a best practice and a standard is what we're forecasting in the next 24 months that 50% of applicants are going to come from a mobile phone with the adoption of it. We only see a 12% of our visitors from a 1.5 in the last 12 months have come from mobile phones. So a best practice and a standard is, are you providing an application or an applicant experience that's really not mobile friendly, but actually optimized? The screening. So how do you filter this down? Some of the jobs that you have in certain regions, you'll drive a fantastic level of candidate flow. Some managers got 50 applicants to go through, some may have 2. But how do you go help them screen them down? And we, again, believe that's a really core best practice with either some basic questions upon the application process or something that ask them really early on in the recruiting process. Assessment to help determine if they're a right fit. Many large retailers have an assessment in place. Majority of medium and small ones do not. Shortlisting, so a simple way, and ideally a system or some kind of tech that or person on your staff that can shortlist those people, simplify, again, the interviewing process and scheduling of those individuals for the manager. If people are dealing with cash, do a criminal check is we believe absolutely critical to making sure that you're driving down and driving turnover, but improving the quality of your hire, and then finding your onboarding process. So when you think about your recruiting process and benchmarking it off of best practice, many of the very large, sophisticated retailers have a process like this in place. And if you think about the steps that you need to put in place to really go say, okay, how are we doing as far as recruitment goes? We've got recommendations here coming up, but think about a really good, clean process. It's no different than a sales process or a logistics process for the being said. When you think about the amount of money that you're spending per year, these averages that I just presented, to have a nice, clean process in place to help drive down that cost, I believe you're missing an opportunity and ultimately should drive an improved level of results. Benchmarking yourself. So are you above or below? So I'm going to introduce some data here that's a little bit different than what we initially talked about, but really get into some of the data and talk about some key strategies that exist around this. So career site conversions. Are you above or below 15 to 20%? And career site conversions, for the sake of clarity, is a visitor when they hit your career site. Are they applying to jobs? Are they giving you information? This is a traditional marketing strategy or a marketing KPI. Is what is your lead conversion rate? It's very important for you to think through. And what we're seeing, best practice with a well-built career site. And I'm not talking about our customers here. I'm talking about the broader market. Company a fantastic job of this, and converting a high level of traffic. There's a few things that will happen. One, you just have more applicants for your job, but two, you also get a better quality just from sheer quality traction. So, recommendations when you think about a career site conversion, are people getting to your careers page? Are they applying? Are they not applying? I believe that obviously having a way for that applicant to apply online is absolutely critical. If it's as simple as email, then so be it. But it's really key. Now, some ways to really go improve your career site conversion, and some of the things that we've seen absolutely critical is a localized sourcing strategy. So what we mean by that is when you think about what you need to do in Edmonton versus what you need to do in downtown Vancouver, they're very, very different. And thinking through from a central perspective, what can we go equip our stores with, or what can we build at a central perspective that really helps to impact these managers and what tools are available to them to succeed in their market. There are certain jobs that work better in certain markets than others, and understanding that and giving that to the team or driving that centrally is a step to driving a better career site conversion. Because that's going to be relevant, and you're going to get the right eyeballs on your content and on these sites. File optimization. So, for a very basic level, is can applicants apply with their mobile phones? It may mean, again, just on a base level, maybe it's just an email. The challenge with this is not, no one's got their resume on their phone or BlackBerry. So when you think about it, is there a simple way, and even if it's as basic as pinch and pull type method, can go and share their information with you on job via phone. As I talked about, we believe this number is going to get north of 50% within the next 24 months, especially in the retail space. We see something different on a corporate level. When we think about hourly job seekers on their phone, they're reading stuff. They're going to expect to do this, and I think this provides a huge opportunity for employers to really create a competitive advantage. So, how do you make this process mobile friendly? And phase, how do you optimize that process? Target messaging. So, as we know, with the advent of social media and just where things are going from an advertising perspective, relevant content at the relevant time to the relevant audience is very, very critical. So versus taking a mass approach, making sure that you're really thinking through my talent network. If you've got an applicant tracking system in place, who do I want to be sending these jobs out to? Who's stated interest in finding out about content? You don't want to send a Calgary email to someone that lives in Edmonton, for example. So you're going to get an increase in career site conversions and applicants for your job by simply making sure the messaging is mass, but it's much more targeted. And obviously leads into the right audience. So this is as basic as people in a certain region. For those of you that use resume databases, Metropolis, Monster, really taking the time to make sure that the content that you're sending out to these individuals is appropriate. Okay, 26, average applicants per job. So again, something for you to think about is how many applicants am I getting per job on average? Is it above or below that level? If it's below or somewhere around this, and again, you can always improve this. Now, I should put a disclaimer in place. More applicants isn't necessarily the only thing you need to do. It's more the right type of applicants, and that ties into the message on the previous page, which is around right message, right time, targeted and localized strategy. Employment branding. This is obviously. I hate to say that employment branding is hot right now, but I think it is. I think the companies are looking at all the ways to go and attract talent versus the post and pray method. Employment branding is a key one. So really understanding who are you, and to the second bullet, what is your EVP? What is a clear employment value proposition to the market? Doing this through a really simple way, making it easy for applicants to apply. It shouldn't be hard. If they have to click through 14 pages, that's not a practice approach. And looking at pre-screen assessment. So we believe a pre-screen assessment what we've seen, anyways, is that you can really use to help facilitate your employment brand message. So it's not just about a job posting or a career site, but are they going through some kind of a pre-screen and some kind of an application process with you that helps reinforce why they should be excited to work for your company? So 4 items we believe are some hanging fruit, some are a little bit more strategic, but really clarifying even on a base level, why would someone kind of want to work for me? Making sure that message is consistent across all of my tools, and then making it easier for apps to apply will really start to drive up your average applicants per job. Turnover. So we referenced this earlier, but I think it's very, very important to think about. I mean, these are the individuals that have huge, huge impact on your stores, and these are these full-time, fine individuals, your sales associates that are really succeeding and hitting numbers on a regular basis, your cashiers that are building relationships with current customers. Then you get the part-time assistant store manager turnover. This is consistent. One of the biggest strategic challenges for companies, in particular ones that are growing, really having a healthy pipeline of ASMs that can be promoted and help you fuel that growth from a store leadership perspective. It gets very, very expensive to go outside to go hire store managers. If you can be doing that talent internally, that's key. And again, look at the averages from a turn perspective. For you to think through where do you sit on that average? Are you above or below? And my hope is that when you start benchmarking yourself off many of these things, they'll start to guide you in what should be your priority next. Like, where can I get the biggest bang for my buck as far as time spent on improving these results? And when we think about turnover, there's an improving turnover, and I mentioned we're going to go in tremendous depth on a lot of these topics over the following webinars. But when we think about turnover, there's a few things. I mean, it's really about improving this quality of hire, but measuring it. And there's 4 core things that can help you not only improve quality of hire, but also give you insight on how you can make it even better longer term. Number 1 is having some kind of an assessment tool. And what I mean by this is it's either an online or email administered assessment that all applicants or top applicants. If you look at any of the large, really successful retailers globally, they've all got something like this in place. It's absolutely a best practice, and it's a standard to go drive quality of hire. And so the assessment can be either an out-of-the-box assessment, if that's the go from a is this person going to turn over? Are they going to be a good team player? Giving some insight into their behaviors, but also helping to predict, are they going to turn over? Are they going to succeed? Is this person a potential leader? The piece is we find is the phone screening process is really key. So as we know, great applicants aren't on the market for a long time, and if they apply, being able to get on the phone and not only phone screen them, but actually what we like to define kind of a little candidate care. There's a selling process there that's needed, and stores do this today. They maybe don't do it via phone screen, but if they see somebody great in the mall, they're going to go up and they're going to go sell them on why to get involved and obviously drive them into an interview process. Post-hire quality checks. So when these individuals are being hired, which ones are working out and which ones aren't? And so understanding why they aren't working out is really going to help you refine on an ongoing basis how you lower those turnover. Now, you may look at your workforce and say, where do I want to start here? Do I have a really high store manager and assistant manager turnover levels compared to the averages? Maybe that may be an area that you want to start versus having to think about every single role in your business. Or maybe you've got a really, really high part-time turnover, and you think, okay, so I need to find out why these people are leaving. And not only post-hire quality check from a manager perspective on, are these people still employed? Are they working out well, and why are they working out well, or why aren't they? And you use some of that content and that data to help refine your employment value proposition, your employment message, but also go drive better results on the front end. And then finally, engagement surveys. So my guess is that everyone on the call has some version of an engagement survey that they do on an annual or biannual basis, and some of you even every 6 months. But an insight on your turnover levels is, why are people engaged? And if they aren't engaged, what are the things that are driving disengagement? And again, that can help drive some of your central HR strategies that's going to, I believe, really impact that turnover for your entire workforce, or maybe even particular roles. So I come from a broad perspective, and when we look at where you measure up, and thinking through some of these different areas in your business to make a big impact on cost. Because at the end of the day, the expectation is the participants on this call are from the HR department. I believe there's some operations and finance people even on this call. But when we think about measure up, it should really be framed in some kind of financial perspective. If you can provide, hopefully did today, is provide you with a baseline foundation on what we believe is kind of the macro level, the key KPIs and data that everyone on this call can use to kind of say, okay, are we above or below, and how well are we performing in relation? Now, we're here to help. So what I this is on a basic level, we can certainly help you calculation to understand just how much is this costing me. So we're certainly, obviously, very, very open to this. So if you're interested in us working with you to help you understand the cost, there's a link at the bottom, mindfieldgroup.com. You can't click on it, obviously, but mindfieldgroup.com/RCC webinar. Happy to kind of spend some time and help you figure this out and build that table and help you understand, are you above or below? And for some of the smaller, more independent retailers on the call, we're obviously happy to do the same thing for you as well, but also if you've got some independent roles that you need help with, we're happy to help. So I got through this a little bit quicker than I did. Now I think we've got lots of questions, which is great. But that really kind of concludes this first webinar. Talking again, so I really hope that you got some initial value. If you grab one nugget out of this, then you can accomplish. But beyond the content and some questions that we'll go through here, we encourage you to join the next webinar, and I think most of you are signed up for it. And we're going to dive in really deep around the attraction and the screening to get into much more of the strategic and even some of the tactical things that come into play around, where should I be posting jobs? Where should I be distributing these? And how do I go? And where do I even start with an assessment tool? So we're hoping to educate you on some of those thoughts and comments. And that concludes the core of the content, and looking forward to some really good discussion here. So Devin, I'll pass it back to you.
Thanks so much, Cameron. That was really interesting. So I did see some questions coming in. There's a chat box, everyone, if you'd like to send your questions to us. I'll get it kicked off with one of the first ones I've seen coming in. You talked a lot about turnover, Cameron. Can you explain a little bit about how should these attendees measure turnover?
Great question. This is if you go Google this, how to measure turnover, you'll get 19 different ways on the web. What I can say is that we look at it from a pretty straightforward basis. Look at your past 12 months at any given time. Looking at it from what does a fully staffed workforce look like for you? So if you are staffed up, what does that look like? And you may have some vacancies across your business. So let's say you've got 95% positions filled. You look at this and then start measuring it on a month-to-month basis, on a 12-month rolling perspective on how hires you make in the last 12 months against what a fully what my full staff count is. That's the simplest way to do it. So what you're able to do is you're able to generate a rolling 12-month turnover level based on how many hires did I make in the last 12 months against what a fully staffed workforce looks like.
Yeah.
That's down, or does that?
Yeah. How would somebody calculate their total annual turnover cost?
Yeah. So certainly this webinar will be available to everyone on the call. So there's really a few things. What you would do is you'd want to think through the buckets of jobs that you've got. So maybe part-time, full-time ASMs and store managers in the example here given, but maybe you want to pick out these different categories of jobs and then use these averages that have been provided here as an indicator on how obviously ASMs and ASM, but if you've got an manager in training, for example, I would attribute that to an ASM cost. So you get really clear on what are the key buckets of employee categories that you've got, and assign the appropriate cost from this document to all hiring demand. So you have to understand turnover. You'd have to understand the buckets of jobs you got and the turnover related to those buckets, and then use then the financial numbers in this webinar to then calculate your annual cost. It's not complex. It's just it's sometimes it's the work to get really know what your turnover is per category. And again, part of the value here we want to be able to provide is that we're helping you with that as well.
Yeah, great. Okay, another question that I can see here. What's the best way to increase my volume of applicants per job?
Yeah, there's different ways. I think that if you're not posting jobs anywhere, obviously, then trying to figure out what are the key localized sourcing strategies that are going to be most effective. So what I mean by this is, in Alberta, Kijiji is fantastic. In Vancouver, Kijiji doesn't really work that well. So I think get really clear on what are some of those key job boards that can be put in place to help support the applicant flow. And then on top of this is what are those one or two consistent localized strategies that can happen that really is going to help drive traffic. The honest is there's great tools like resume databases and so forth that you can search for candidates and drive email campaigns out to. There's been some challenges when I think we need to give all these tools to store managers to go and use. I think a lot of this has to be centralized, but I think getting your postings on, elite job boards and more job boards, testing to see what works, and most important is make sure you've got a really easy way for people to apply. If you don't have that, you're going to struggle. I don't care where you're advertising the job. The market is way too hot right now, so if it's not easy and they get frustrated with the application process, they'll just drop off.
Yeah.
That specific question, we will get into some depth in the next webinar as well on recommendations around localized sourcing strategies and which boards work and which boards don't, and some considerations for how participants in the webinar go and build their own customized sourcing strategy.
It's going to be great. I see another question here. Do you have any suggestions for the Quebec City job market?
My first comment is it's really hard to recruit in Quebec right now. Because there is no central, there's no kind of key source that everybody goes to. There are a few things. Emploi Quebec obviously is the government board out there, which is a moderate job. We found in the Quebec market, some of the databases work quite well actually. Tools Indeed are doing a pretty good job of getting eyeballs in the Quebec market. I believe when it comes to Quebec and Quebec City in general, if I'm going to dig into our data and I'll make sure we've got that for our next webinar because I think that's probably a pretty consistent problem outside of Alberta is the Quebec market. But I believe there's also a classified site that is quite effective in Quebec that I'll track down for the next webinar as well. But Quebec's a really tough market, and Quebec City obviously is a difficult market. What I can say is if you haven't translated your job descriptions properly, that's a way to turn people off. Making sure that they have a French application process is super critical. So those two things will facilitate any strategies that you put in place. But my commitment to the group is I'll come back with some detail on some ideas and talk to my team on what works really well in Quebec.
Yeah, and that's a really good point too. If anybody has questions that you're looking for some very specific information on, you can reach out to the RCC customer service team, and we can connect you with the MindField team as well and get you some of that information. I'm also going to be sending out an email afterwards with the link to the recording and the presentation slides. So if there's anything, Cameron, that you'd like to include in that follow-up email, then we can get that out to all the attendees. So we have time for a couple more questions. I mean, it looks like we're going to be wrapping up a little bit early, which is great. Everyone will get a little bit of time back in their day. How about for our last question, we'll say this one here. What should be on our career site in regards to content to improve our conversion rates?
Good question. So the basic thing is an active list of open jobs. So on the elementary level, I think that's really important. An active list of open jobs and a really simple way to get and find the jobs is key. Beyond this is the active jobs that are on there may not be of interest to the job seeker that has landed on a website. So how you then created another way, either an open application or some kind of join your talent network component that allows them to potentially quickly join your talent network and stay up to date for future jobs. Your employee value proposition is also very important. So what is unique about your business? Why should people care about you as a retailer and as an employer? So having a key about us and a statement, and it's not the statement about us that you'd find on a corporate site. It's really about us as an employer. So what key features, benefits of working for us as a business? What makes you unique? And more importantly, is make sure that the content on your site really speaks to your ideal candidate. If you want to hire sports enthusiasts, then make sure that it talks to sports enthusiasts. If you want to hire people that love working on cars, make sure that it speaks to people that love working on cars. If it's fashionistas you want to hire, then make sure that your content speaks to fashionistas. So there's a few key pieces of content that are important. An active job list, and for that job seeker to engage with you if there's a job that they're not interested in. A couple of key statements and a section of the site that really talks to what makes your employment value proposition unique and attractive. And finally, it's how content is written. It's a way that really speaks to who you ultimately want to go attract to your business. So I think if you go there, they're kind of the core base level components that I think start to draw a really good conversion rate and a successful career site.
So as you see on the screen here, we've got another session happening next week on October 9th at the same time from 2 to 3 p.m. That session is called How to Attract and Screen Top Retail Talent. And then we've got a third session coming up the week after. So feel free to register for all of those sessions. And Cameron, I'd like to thank you for this presentation. It was really informative. I hope everybody who's attended has found it valuable. If you have any additional questions for Cameron, feel free to send them into RCC's customer service team. We've got an email address, customerservice@retailcouncil.org. And as you exit the session, you're going to be redirected to a survey where I'd just encourage you to take a couple of minutes to provide us with some feedback on the presentation so we can take that into account as we're planning our next sessions. So Cameron, thank you, and thank you everybody for attending, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Deb. Thanks, everyone.